In this video, we will discuss about spinal muscular atrophy. So this disease is related to motor neuron survival or survival motor neuron gene, that is popularly known as SMN gene. And what are the causes or what are the symptoms of this spinal muscular disorder that patient might get muscle weakness or muscle thinning, and that even in worst case it might leads to it might lead to premature death. So problem is arises in the SMN2 gene, because SMN2 gene is responsible for the formation of the protein that helps in the proper functioning of motor neuron, or you can say it helps in survival of motor neuron. And this SMN2 gene is found in chromosome 5q, and uh, there are other copies of these four gene that are present in the uh, centromeric region of chromosome 5q, and its length is around 500 kilobases, and the copy of these four genes are also present in telomeric region of chromosome 5q. Its length is also around 500 kilobases. However, the copies are not exact, as we can see that in centromeric region the gene is SMN2, whereas in telomeric region gene is SMN1. So the difference arises in SMN1, that is in exon 7, or more precisely we can say in the sixth base of exon 7 is replaced uh, replaced uh, is replaced by C, whereas in SMN2 that base is T, that is tyrosine, whereas in uh, SMN1 that basis is tyrosine is replaced by cytosine. And because of this, what happens is that the final protein that is formed is most of the final protein that is formed is unstable, truncated and degraded, whereas only 10% of the proteins are able to form its uh, stable form that can perform the function of SMN1 gene. One thing I need to correct it that I have mentioned previously in this video is that it is the spinal muscular atrophy is caused because of the disruption of SMN1 gene, not SMN2 gene. And this SMN2 gene is trying to compensate the work of SMN1 gene. However, what happens is that the final product through this SMN2 gene is most of the time unstable, and only 10% of this protein is stable. And the data shows that the people who have this spinal muscular atrophy contains either two or more copies of this SMN2 gene. And the more copies of this SMN2 genes are present, there are more possibility that will be able to compensate some part of this SMN1. And the patient that has around 4 to 5 copies of this SMN2 gene does not show that many symptoms of SMN. Patients that have less number of SMN2 genes. Let me correct this statement. Patients that has 4 to 5 copies of SMN2 genes does not show many symptoms. Does not show many symptoms, or we can say is asymptomatic against spinal muscular atrophy. Let us understand some in details about this change differences in this SMN2 and SMN1 gene. So this is the SMN1 gene that is responsible for survival of motor neuron. So in this, in axon 7, at the sixth base of axon 7 is C is present. So what happens is that it will promote the axon splicing. Axon splicing, or splicing, is a term that is used to remove the non-coding intron part and connect the axon part. So in case of SMN1, uh, the splicing occurs correctly, and the full length of SMN mRNA is formed that helps in the formation of functional protein. But what happens in the SMN2 derived mRNA is that at this mRNA formation of this exon 7, the U is present. So what it will does is it will suppress the exon splicing. So most of the mRNA that is formed after splicing from this SMN2 derived mRNA does not contain exon 7. So 90% of this mRNA that is formed from SMN2 does not have this exon 7, and only 10% of them are able to form the full length mRNA. So this is the reason that this at 7th base of exon 7 suppress the splicing mechanism. So because of this, the most of the time the exon 7 does not get spliced or included into the final structure of mRNA after splicing. So this leads to non-functional protein formation. And since in the patient that does not have this SMN1 gene, functional SMN1 gene, will have less number of will face problems uh, will face problems to do the function that are being done by functional protein that is derived from SMN1 gene. And those patients that have multiple copies of this SMN2 gene might be able to compensate, and those patients might not see any symptoms or remain asymptomatic against this uh, disease, that is spinal muscular atrophy. I hope you have understood something about this spinal muscular atrophy and the reason uh, why this problem arises. So if you need to understand more in-depth information, if you need to get more in-depth information about this spinal muscular atrophy, you can go through the reference that has been provided in the description. That's all for this video. Thank you for your time.